Destiny 2's penultimate expansion Lightfall has landed, and with just one more major expansion planned and the end of the Light and Darkness saga in sight, Lightfall finally gives us answers to some long-held mysteries. Just kidding, it doesn't explain anything, but hey, we do get some Silver Surfers. I'm just going to mostly focus on Lightfall's campaign in this review. I don't have time to explain why I don't have time to explain all the endgame content and various other tweaks and quality of life changes. If you're a Destiny diehard, you don't need me to tell you all about that stuff. And if you're not, then me explaining it is just gibberish anyway. When it comes to Destiny's story, I think it's fair to say that with all its Taken Kings, Witch Queens, Worm Gods, Moon Wizards, Big Balls, Space Pyramids, and now this guy with the smoky head situation, it's always been tough to follow for all but the most invested in its lore. The broad light vs dark story is easy to understand, but with an increased focus on seasonal storytelling, and with sizable chunks of the story now vaulted and inaccessible, it's impossible for anyone to experience the entire story from start to end. It's all a bit of a Frankenstein's monster at this point. But ever since Destiny 2 launched, most of the campaigns have at least done a solid job of telling their own interesting and self-contained stories. Lightfall sadly does not do a great job of telling an interesting self-contained story. Lightfall starts with an epic space battle with the Witness and their ominous pyramid ships arriving at Earth's doorstep along with his Cabal disciple Callus. Meanwhile, the Traveler, that familiar floating orb, has launched away from the last city to meet him head on. And as a longtime Destiny player, finally seeing these two major forces of light and darkness meet in battle is exhilarating. And who knew, the Traveler has a giant tree laser. But instead of getting to take part in this epic battle we've wanted to see forever, Lightfall has us chase a MacGuffin called the Veil to Neptune. I don't know what the Veil is, and neither does anyone else apparently, but it's clearly important. It's in Neomuna, a hidden city in Neptune, looked after by what could best be described as a couple of rejects from a failed DC comic, the Cloudstriders.
Welcome to Neomuna! You're just like, bam, pew, pow.
Much like the weird tone of the Cloudstriders, the bright and clean neon aesthetic of Neomuna doesn't mesh with what I've come to love about Destiny's art style, which has always been a beautiful blend of a grand sci-fi civilization ravaged from ages of apocalyptic decay or consumed by strange space magic. While Neomuna does make for a distinctly different location than we've ever seen in Destiny before, it just kinda looks like an empty sci-fi resort, with many of its streets and locales blending together. Adding to the empty feeling is the revelation that everyone in the city is living in some virtual Matrix/metaverse situation, which is powered by something called the Cloud Arc, which in turn is powered by the Veil, somehow. To be honest, I couldn't help but feel it was just an easy way for Bungie to not have to put any people in the city, and it also makes me wonder why there's so many fully stocked bars and shops if everyone's living in a digital world. Throughout the campaign, the story doesn't really go anywhere interesting either, and mostly flounders around between us trying to find the Veil and trying to tame the new Strand subclass. Although, without spoiling anything, it does at least end on a cliffhanger that has my attention. But it's hard not to get the feeling that Lightfall is very much just a stepping stone towards the final shape. There's just very little in between the opening and closing cutscenes to care about, and anything we are given isn't really explained in any way that makes it interesting. It's definitely a bit of a return to the vague and unsatisfying, I don't have time to explain why I don't have time to explain brand of storytelling the original Destiny was lambasted for. Gameplay-wise, the missions are solid though. Destiny's top-tier shooting and space magic are as fun to wield as ever, and the encounter design makes for plenty of thrilling fights with some great set pieces throughout. Playing through the campaign on Legendary difficulty made for some edge-of-my-seat sweat fests. I often forget how hard Destiny can be, especially solo. Lightfall's main enemies are a slightly tweaked Cabal force, but it's pretty much just the ordinary Cabal with a little shield thingy that pops out of some of the enemies. There are, however, new Tormentors to contend with, who are scattered throughout the campaign as mini-bosses. I like how intimidating they are and how they pressure you and chase you around arenas, as they can grab you and insta-kill you if you let them get too close. As you run around Neptune trying to find the Veil, you'll end up finding bits of Strand energy that let you briefly experience the new Strand subclass, which you spend a lot of time in the story figuring out how to master. Once you do figure it out though, it is very satisfying to wield, at least on my Warlock it was. It has an enjoyable cascading nature, with strands flying out from one enemy to the next, helping deliver ever higher DPS on the enemies it affects. My Warlock super is also just a giant missile barrage, and who doesn't love turning into a flying rocket-launching space wizard for a second? Strand's most interesting addition though is that by default, it ditches the traditional grenade for a grapple move, because what would a shooter be in 2023 without a grapple? Mechanically, it's a pretty good one, with a nice bit of control offered during flight, and it brings a lot of speed and mobility to fights. But outside of specific situations, like when they fill an arena with special grapple points, it has a lengthy cooldown, which felt a bit wrong for a grapple. Still, I'm enjoying experimenting with Strand and look forward to figuring out some new builds. At the end of the day for Destiny players, the yearly campaign is usually little more than a big dose of story content, which, yeah, is sadly disappointing in Lightfall. But Destiny has always been a game enjoyed more for its gameplay and social features than its plot. At least it's certainly not the first time Destiny fans have persevered through some weak storytelling. It's just especially disheartening that it's happened here at what should be an exciting lead up to the grand climax of its epic story. For dedicated players though, it's going to be the endgame and seasonal activities, and of course the new raid, that will really determine Lightfall's quality and value over the coming year, much more than its campaign missions. I would say for those curious about jumping into Destiny for the first time, or lapsed players returning after a long hiatus, Lightfall isn't a great jumping in point, and it may be best to wait for the final Shape expansion to hopefully help round out the story in a satisfying way. So whether I'd give this a play or a pass kind of depends on who I'm talking to. But if I ask myself the simple question of, did I have a good time with Lightfall's campaign? Then yes. Just don't go in expecting a great story. Play.